Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Active Populi podcast. Today we're talking about tensions rising in the South China Sea, the Hancock Parish Council debacle, and also Matt Hancock being a cock, and much more. So Jay, I'm going over to you. How do you want to start this?
Hello, Jack. I'm Jay, and there's also we can't forget about Tom.
Tom.
Yeah.
Hello, Tom.
Hello there, everybody.
So today, I think, as we always do, I say always, we've only done one so far. I think it'd be a good idea to start with the COVID statistics. So in kind of tradition, I'll read them out, and we'll all stand in awe of the amount of doses delivered by our great government.
By the almighty and all-powerful Bozza Johnson.
Yeah,
the
which could never do anything wrong. So we've got, this is a tricky one, 18,691,835 doses delivered, which is absolutely amazing. Probably around 30% of the population-ish, but below that. And this is on the 25th. Second dose has gone up from last time, which you'll remember was about 500,000. It's now 700,000. And death rate is obviously a horrible fact of how many people we've got. We've got 122,000 people dead because of COVID virus. That's within 28 days of the test, and 1,335 with COVID virus on their certificate. So these are all very harrowing statistics to kind of show what the government's been doing. What do we all think about the current handling of COVID by the government?
Well, go on, Tom.
Okay, sure. When you look at the numbers, obviously harrowing deaths and constant rises, but it appears to be on the decline. You could say this is momentary and it's going to spike back up again. Especially now that on the roadmap we're looking to open things up over time. But what we see right now is a slow decrease. People tested in the last 7 days down 15.7%. That's quite a large decrease over time. And if we keep the trend up, then all of a sudden things are going to get a lot easier. But the question is, have we already put into place the wrong kind of actions? Are we about to watch it spike up again when we reintroduce schools? What do you think, Jack?
Well, we are doing really good with the vaccine rate of, I think the population is around 80 million. So we have 18 million out of 80 million. That's around about 25%. A very, very rough estimate. But that's really good. I think we're behind Israel, the United Arab Emirates. I think we're
all very
fourth.
rich countries with quite a small population.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So for a big country that isn't, that's
we are doing very well.
Yeah.
Another thing, I think a big issue that a lot of people have been rightly raising is the issue. COVAX, the charity giving COVID jabs to countries that wouldn't be able to afford it. Boris Johnson's been very hesitant to give a date or any statistics about how many how many jabs he'd give and donate to this charity, which I think's interesting that he's not doing that. Johnson's also outlined the big roadmap. Did everyone tune in to the program? When was it? Monday?
I think he looks at the Cliff Notes instead. He rambles.
He does indeed. Well, I've got the key dates here. So, step 1, 8th of March, schools open, outdoor after-school sports allowed. So that's great. I mean, I don't know if you all got the letter today that we're going to go to school for our tests and to teach us how to do testing on Thursday. And go in what was it? So 4 tests a week. So that's safe, and it's somewhat relieving that we'll be going back. 2 people are allowed to sit outside, outdoors. Care home residents are allowed 1 regular visitor. So all these things, and it's slowly going to get better, more free. And then by the 21st of March, all legal limits on social contact will be removed, and then COVID will be disappeared. Everyone will be happy. No, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, by the 21st of June, lockdown over. But obviously, if we pedal that back, that's quite a while away. And will we be able to hit that target based on the other things we're opening up beforehand? So 12th of April, non-essential retail's back open. 17th of May, 30 people outdoors. Those kind of things could really give us a step back if we're not careful about this. But hopefully, I assume the reasoning is vaccine rates go up, infection rates go down, and then we open things up. And hopefully there shouldn't be anything to tip the balance the other way. What do you think, Jack?
So, both of you, knowing the government's track record with equipment management and fall back on promises, do you think we will, the promise of 4 tests a week for students will be kept, considering how many people go to our school, 1,000, and if it's 4 times a week, that's 4,000 tests a week. Do you reckon the government has the logistics to supply those tests, or do you think they'll fall short again?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, Jack. I mean, this brings us, I don't dare I move on to the next topic,
Ooh.
being Matt Hancock at the peril of the schedule. But I'm going to kind of ring in that a bit. So we're going to talk a bit about the Matt Hancock scandal that's been in the news later on. But that because is a well-known fact now that £22 billion has been frittered away by the UK government on the failed track and trace, which is something like 41% of cases go under unknown from the track and trace, and also staggering £13 billion has been spent on PPE contracts. So, and also fun fact is the EU membership only costs 11 billion.
Ooh.
Only cost for the small price of 11 billion. But so I don't know, because they clearly haven't been able to deal with the logistics of public health, and that's clearly shown through these horrible images of these public health workers wearing bin bags just like to look after patients and things like that. So it's daunting, and I don't, and I don't think many other people have much trust in the government anymore. What do you think about that, Tom?
Well, the problem being, especially like the tests we're supposedly doing are, the tonsil swab ones, where like you put in your mouth, you swab around your tonsils, you give it back, and then you should get a test back. However, if you're not careful, like I would assume most possibly say, let's say like 13 to 16-year-olds won't be when they go back to school with a tonsil swab they have to do themselves. They're going to mess it up, because the problem being, if you end up like touching other parts of your mouth, there's problems with the test due to that. And it's like notoriously unreliable and can give like false positives or like lots of false negatives. And that could be really dangerous to like allow that into school. Doing that 4 times a week.
And these false positives are really detrimental to the students as well, because they'll be off school, they'll be thrown off the land and be made to go to online school for 2 weeks, even if just nothing's actually happened. So that's quite scary. Any views, Jack?
I mean, I doubt people will willingly do those, or some people will willingly do those tests. Imagine year 7s or year 8s. I doubt they are too keen on shoving a swab up their nose properly and then shoving it down their throat.
Supervision.
Yeah. So I think they're being a bit optimistic by even promising that they can do 4 a week, and then saying that it will be effective, especially in the lower years.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, isn't it? Like, how are we gonna? It's definitely not going to be very accurate. I mean, trusting, I should say, 12-year-olds to do a test is not the best way to move forward, I don't think. I mean,
I suppose those tests in general, like, okay, the government's been very weaselly of the words they've been using, because we've been told 4 tests a week, but we were also told not so long ago 2 tests a week, and at some point we were told 4 a fortnight, which 2 a week. I think what's going on here is the government's going to give us a few different possible variations, and they're going to backpedal as they go along to what they find most manageable. Because I don't even think it's malicious. I think on one hand it's just incompetence on the people who are like running this kind of testing initiative. And how much pressure have they now put on on teachers in the school and like head teachers and anyone else inside of the school who now has to organize these things based on what the government has just told them is going to go ahead? It just seems like a lot of undue pressure to put on people all at once.
Yeah, I think the government being incompetent isn't much of a change from their leadership over summer. Shall we move on to the big news this week?
Yeah.
And if anyone watched the Piers Morgan interview with Matt Hancock, I did, with much excitement to see that one of these ministers getting grilled, as they should be.
It's very nice to see.
It's very nice to see them squirm. It makes me sound quite sadistic.
Yeah.
So this is the news that Matt Hancock supplied his former pub landlord with this kind of it's for him to supply some medical supplies, even though he had no experience whatsoever in public health. What do you think about that, Tom?
He's handing out PPE contracts to anybody that he knows it could benefit him. It's like it's what the government always does. They keep their friends closer than they do the people who they should really care about. Like, what do you think, Jack? I mean, because it seems to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might have not mentioned a really incriminating point is that Matt Hancock, upon like the start of this being released, in his next interview, he removed the picture of his old pub and his old landlord. So he's obviously trying to cover it up, which really incriminates him. And again, it's a 30 million contract. This company had never touched PPE before, so it's a big question of why did Matt Hancock give this company in particular this £30 million contract? And one of the glaring answers is this guy is Matt Hancock's friend. It's very obvious that it is his friend. They have many photos together. Matt Hancock gave this contract to a friend, and that is not how the government should work.
Yeah, definitely. If you watch the Piers Morgan interview, but he refuses to acknowledge it at all, and he actually demands from Piers that he thanks Matt Hancock and his team for the amazing work they did. You probably can't see this as a podcast now. I just did amazing in parentheses. Amazing work they did on providing PPE, and then obviously Piers came back with, oh well, these people were in bin bags. I'm not gonna say well done for all the doctors who died because of your failure to provide PPE. And then Matt Hancock was, oh well, you're obviously wrong because my people did a great job. And instead of, he didn't even he just completely ignored this claim that he's being corrupt, even though it's been proven in court. He was proven in court to be these actions to be corrupt. But he just completely disregarded this and actually demanded that they thank him for his handling, which I think is absolutely shocking.
Mm-hmm.
It's bordering on delusional. the way that government ministers come out and they say these things and they grandstand and they act really grandiose and that they've done some massive thing that we can all clearly see they've failed in, yet they act as though everything's came out like perfect. And I think it's kind of odd, to say the least, that we allow ministers to get away with this, or at least I don't think they're put up to they're not what's what I'm looking for. They're not they're not punished for their actions. They're not reprimanded properly.
Phrases, They're
not hung, drawn, or quartered.
Well, that would be something very different. But another thing that disgusted me was the lack of Labour response. We expect Labour to be the great party to. What did Keir Starmer say? I'm going to fight the Conservatives and make sure but he hasn't responded, and he's been the Shadow Justice said this is not the right circumstances where we should be making Health Secretary resign. We need to put the pandemic first, and this is like, well, no. Your job as a justice minister is to stand for the people of the country and see when clearly corruption has taken place, to stand for these people and say, well, you need to resign. And then this is all the case with all these heralded Labour leaders like the Andy Burnham, the kind of populist mayor of Manchester, and he's like he was still really hesitant to say anything and just waited for Sir Keir Starmer's response. And Sir Keir Starmer hasn't said anything either. They seem to be under this spell where they're too scared to stand up, and we don't want an opposition like that. We want an opposition who can stand up comfortably to a government that's failing to provide for the nation.
Mm-hmm. It definitely seems that from that the as an opposition they seem to be weak, because I mean this is a really big thing. Health minister corrupt during a massive pandemic, giving PPE contract to not suitable companies. This should be grounds for career-ending stuff. But it's just not, which is weird.
It's being swept under the rug because it appears to me, at least I seem to see some kind of originally when the story first kind of broke, it broke tiny. We hardly saw any media coverage to begin with until quite a bit of time afterwards, because originally it was brought up, I think quite a while ago now, And when it originally got brought up, it was brought up in isolation. It was small. No one seemed to bother, and it was mostly swept under the rug. And now, present day, the media starts blaring about it, but not as much as they're blaring about the royals. And somehow we see this as acceptable. That what happens and what our ministers do, and when it's like pernicious and it's wrong and it's incompetent,
actually affecting the British population.
Yeah, unlike the royal family right now. And it appears that we just don't care, and our opposition doesn't seem to care either, and they seem to have lost their backbone, which is the one thing you want your opposition to have the most. You want them to call out the current government, and they don't appear to be doing that.
Yeah, is it like maybe, dare I say, kind of like corruption within the opposition as well, within the media?
Possibly.
Fail to recognise and call out such a, as you say, such a pernicious act as what Hancock has been engaging in, definitely.
It all sums up this idea of incompetency within the government, or perhaps perceived incompetency that really just hides like some pernicious act hidden underneath. Because it almost feels as though, and again, I seem to be getting very conspiratorial in these, which I don't mean to, but it's really easy. It's easy to make these reaches as time goes on. That it was like a media blackout on this whole event, and I don't know why we thought that was the best thing to do, not to reprimand the health minister during a pandemic, but it appears that we decided, like, we all just sat on our thumbs and thought, this is easy to just leave alone, and it'll wash away, and it won't cause any problems. And again, like you said, NHS members are in bin bags. This is not something we should be living through right now.
Like, this is like, maybe an analogy would be like, let's say a surgeon's doing a surgery and he doesn't wash his hands, and they say, well, you're going to have to leave the surgery if you aren't going to wash your hands. And he goes, well, let's just get the surgery done first. That's a priority. I mean, that's what's basically happening with Matt Hancock. He is the kind of dirt on the surgeon's hands that he needs to wash off before he continues. We as a nation continue the surgery. I don't know if you wanted to have a break now and then move on to Jack's favourite topic of the current issue in the East China Sea.
Yes,
so we'll leave you now for a break.
For a brief 0-second break. Have fun.
It's in about 15 seconds. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Act Populi. We recently discussed Matt Hancock being a cock and giving his Bezzy mate £30 million of corrupted funds, and we also discussed Boris's roadmap and the COVID statistics. Now let's turn our attention to something more foreign, something that's proper, really important, and that is the East China Sea incident.
Just before we start, Jack, I like your use of foreign. It made it sound very UKIP.
Foreign. bloody foreigners.
Bloody foreigners messing around in the East China Sea.
Honestly, because
so,
that's our sea.
So the East China Sea, to give you guys a recap on what it is, the East China Sea and the South China Sea is the sea around China. Who would have guessed it, right? So, a few facts about the sea is 1/3 of all maritime trade runs through it. It is worth £3 trillion in trade. 12% of all the nation's food in Asia comes from there, and the sea holds 50% of all fishing vessels. US estimates, which are much lower than China's estimates.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. Peg the amount of natural gas in the sea to be 190 million cubic feet of natural gas and 11 billion barrels of oil. So yeah, it is a very important sea, and multiple.
It's a treasure trove.
Yeah, and multiple nations have claims to it.
If Britain can handle that, I think they can pay off their PPE debts like that.
Yeah, they probably could. So the current rules of ownership of stuff is the 200-mile or 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone. So from a country's mainland or legally owned land, they get 200 miles into sea worth of ownership of the stuff in it. So basically, China is refuting that. They have this map from 1947 that says they own 80% of the sea, and that is 1,880 kilometers, including all of the oil and natural gas like deposits.
Yeah.
So as you know, they've been building artificial islands, and they've just recently allowed the Chinese Coast Guard to use weapons to destroy foreign economic structures and fishing boats. So, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, honestly, like it's really, as far as I'm aware, there's been some, as you can imagine, massive tensions in the East China Sea, especially between Japan right now. Back in November, they had the foreign minister for China over, and the first thing they did was call them out on this because obviously Japan probably has equal claims to that sea right now because of where they're situated. But China, obviously, bigger stick diplomacy, it has the bigger military, so it wants to take over that entire area. And I had a look, and China's current maritime law, and I quote now, they said they would take all necessary measures, including the use of weapons, when national sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction are being illegally infringed upon by foreign organizations or individuals at sea. As you can imagine, USA, not a fan of this in the slightest. However,
No.
China really wants to hold on to this law and hold on to the sea, even if they don't own it per se, as far as we're concerned. Right now, because every country comes up with its own laws, they've decided legally it's their purview, even if the UN disagrees, the USA disagrees, or I say the UN disagrees. They haven't, as far as I know, they haven't weighed in properly on the issue yet because forever the UN stays as this impartial judge that does nothing, I want to say. So, what
Yeah.
do you think?
Well, there's also the islands, isn't there? Between them,
Yeah.
the Senkaku and the Diu Islands. Sorry for any residents of those islands that may happen to be listening to the podcast today. I know we've got a few avid listeners from the East China Sea area. So I think that's sort of the high point of kind of contention. There's been a lot of military and especially kind of air clashes between China and Japan. Any views on that, Jack? You seem to be quite versed in this.
So the Senkaku Islands are a major hotbed of activity, mostly because the exclusive economic zones of the Okinawa prefecture and mainland China actually overlap. So China might be argued to have a more rightful claim, especially considering their claim to the South China Sea, which was a map made in 1947. So there's two seas. There's the South China Sea that's bordering on Vietnam, Burma, Indonesia, those countries. China is basically claiming all of that. Then there's the East China Sea, and that is near the Senkaku Islands, and there is a oil reserve there, and it's a strategic location. I think the oil reserves mainly fall under the Japanese economic zone. However, of course, China wants to change that. They're using, again, military tactics. I believe just recently Chinese Japanese fishing vessels were chased out. There have been Chinese incursions into the Japanese air defense zone, and so China is expanding outwards into the sea.
But obviously, honestly, I wanted to get a tiny bit more philosophical. Who owns the sea? And what I mean by that is, when we look at currently legislation in place from the UN, is that so like the stars, the planets, they're like united heritage of humanity, the human race. We look at them as all equally owned by everyone. I mean, until America gets its space force up and running. But the sea right now, obviously, you've got fishing boats patrolling it, you've got people coming over it. But what gives any country more of a right than another to expand the control of its borders over to it? Like, obviously, right now we've got like limits in place on how far they can go. But what's to stop a country from expanding, and what's to stop a country from retracting from that? And who decides these disputes? And more importantly, should anyone be able to claim ownership of these oceans?
Well, there is law. I believe in the UN law, a country has full sovereignty, 12 nautical miles from its land borders, and then a further 12 nautical miles for a bit less control. And then in terms of resources, it's 200 nautical miles from a country's mainland, or like any land they own. And that is how much, like, those are the resources a country is allowed to claim and then contract out. Recently, China has tried to build islands to expand its claim, these were overruled by the UN, meaning these new Chinese islands aren't actually proper Chinese islands and are therefore not counted in the economic zone. So yeah, those are the UN rules of the sea. China aren't recognizing them, which is the main issue because they can just not recognize them. The UN isn't gonna pull up its massive UN army and make them because it doesn't exist. So they can just not follow it, and
But I think this is a really interesting point. I think maybe for a future series we could focus on a particular topic instead of just going through the news. That's probably maybe an idea for a different series. But China as this kind of growing power that I think would be really interesting to talk about in a couple of days' time, couple of weeks' time. Not only through the seas, but also through the land and through Eastern Europe as well. They've got quite an aggressive expansionist policy.
Yeah,
quite akin to the policy of the Soviet Union back in the 60s and 70s. So it's interesting. I think people need to start recognizing China for this massive power that's taking over the world, if I were to use the kind of McCarthy rhetoric that was used then. Do you have anything to say, Tom?
Well, I think now, why don't we go from some sea borders to some a little more regional land borders, and in particular how the I think the Winslow is council area is going to be merged with the Handsforth parish.
Handsforth Parish Council, the ridiculously famous council that has gained 3.3 million views. I gave it another watch, a binge watch before the podcast today. I would watch it before. There's also a great musical as well that someone's done about it. It's become this kind of real icon of, dare I say, British popular culture. And then they actually live stream the second meeting where loads of people catcalled in. that got views of 3,500. Not as many as Factor Popular get, but I'm sure it's definitely something.
It's getting close.
Yeah, this is the idea that they're going to kind of try and merge Wilmslow and Hanforth together. Jackie Weaver, the famous Jackie Weaver. You have no authority here, Jack.
No
authority whatsoever. She said,
can we please elect a new chairman? Who is going to be the chairman?
Well, she said she was sure the people of Hanforth will be up in arms about the proposed merger. So I don't think there's anything for us to say about this. It's nothing pressing, politically wise.
It's
no, not really.
It's more kind of the microcosm of politics as a whole, where it's just a bunch of people squabbling, especially with parish councils, because it's filled with people who want power, and they squabble endlessly and appear to get nothing done.
And who haven't actually got much political qualifications anyway. This is another issue, isn't it? Why should we have? I think we can blame Blair for this. I think even Cameron maybe as well for this kind of the ending of parish councils, and because back in the 60s and 70s it was a massive role for the local council of the area, but that's kind of been diminished now, and it's who knows what's happening in the council elections of Warrington or whatever. And no one really knows, do they?
No.
I don't think I could tell you the councillor for Warrington. And I don't think anyone else could. Yeah.
I doubt Jackie is right in her claims that the people of Handsforth will be up in arms. Would anyone really mind? I wouldn't care if I became culture. I'm sure you people wouldn't mind if your council got changed a bit. I don't think anyone minds or cares. I doubt anyone really votes in council elections at all ever.
No.
Tom,
minds or cares.
I am going to be honest, you've probably just opened a can of big worms where all the people of Hanforth are going to come to your house with burning torches, burning barrels, and the
because as we know, the people of Hanforth are avid listeners. East China Sea Islands to this podcast.
I say they can come if they really wish to. They have no authority in my house.
They have no authority here.
I'm sure their mass army will be led by Secretary Xi Jinping as well, along with the rest of the Chinese military. So I think, to end on that comical note, I think that's the
Do you mind if
Oh.
we speak on something that me and Tom were discussing earlier? I believe
please.
Biden has authorized airstrikes in Syria.
Yes, he has.
If I am corrected. And also to contrast that, let me read you a tweet made by Biden on the
Is this some kind of
January, February,
sabotage
March,
to make?
April,
Because
May,
I haven't
June
researched this.
on on the 22nd of June 2019. Trump's to quote, Trump's erratic, impulsive actions are the last thing we need as commander-in-chief. No president should order a military strike without fully understanding the consequences. We don't need another war in the Middle East, but Trump's actions towards Iran only make that more likely. Now, isn't that quite a
Height of hypocrisy.
quite a bit
Of course it
hypocrisy?
is.
Yeah.
That's always the case with Joe Biden. He's just a slightly less racist old man,
Yeah.
and that's going to be the case. I mean, Kamala Harris is different, but she's going to be a long time if ever she will become president. And
Yeah.
Biden isn't all great, and we need to recognize that he isn't some kind of he isn't some kind of John F. Kennedy president who is perfect. He wasn't really perfect, but he's made
Doing
to
crack in the
seem
bathroom.
perfect. Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, Joe Biden is, I would say, the largest hypocrite. One of the largest hypocrites. What we've seen
In the world.
in US politics, like sitting of Obama. If you go back to some old interviews, and I say old, I'm talking 2007, 2008, of him completely disavowing the idea of gay marriage. Funnily
I
enough,
watched
Dick
them.
Cheney. Yeah. And then you see today, you see current Biden helping like officiate gay marriages, and you think,
And even
what happened here?
you can go back to the 1970s when he was opposing segregation. He was
Yeah, he
kind of
called it.
supporting segregation.
Yeah, I remember the quote here. He said that if we allow races to mix, we'll make a racial jungle of our schools. That right there just shows like this man doesn't have any real opinions. He's a husk of the establishment and a husk of like we talked a lot about Trump as a populist leader last time. I think we did. Is Joe Biden the exact same thing? Only he's populist in a very more minute way, or at least more subdued, but he still does the same thing. He sways a popular opinion in whichever way it swings.
He's a populist with some political knowledge.
Yeah. I mean,
think
some. I really want to keep the sum on there because that's really important to me there.
he has been
Joe
in
Biden,
politics for 50 years.
50 years too long, I'd say.
So
I think he has got plenty of knowledge, but I think, was that people have been saying like Trump was kind of a political genius, the way he convinced so many people to agree with legislator that was so against them, kind of these really neoliberal views that would only really benefit the top of society. He convinced all these really poor people living in desperate poverty in the deep south to vote for him, even though none of his legislators even going to help them in the slightest. I mean, I think that's a real political genius to be able to convince that many people to vote for him.
And to turn it back to a more philosophical tone, I'm assuming you are both well versed in Plato's critique of democracy. Could we perhaps be seeing the stage of demagoguery, where people are more voting for people's like appearance or like their popularity or their swing to popularity to win rather than their actual beliefs?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I mean, we had this conversation last time with him.
Yeah.
We don't want to get into the whole point of populism.
It's shit.
But I think it's definitely risking democracy. Anyway, I think we're going to have to end it there. We'll talk more next week about the situation, whatever arises. So we're going to end it. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much for watching.
That's the end of the podcast.